This is Late Night Politics on StarFM, taking an in-depth look at the Zimbabwean political scene.
It's a Monday and it's Late Night Politics. My name is George Msumba. Ever since her entry into politics in the 1990s, she has been one person who is difficult to ignore. Outspoken, brash, shooting from the hip, and controversial has become synonymous with our guest tonight on Late Night Politics. Tonight we are discussing women in politics, and I would like to welcome to the program Honorable Priscilla Misihairabwi-Mushonga. Welcome to Late Night Politics.
Thank you. Good evening.
First things first, the word controversy and yourself, are you synonymous with controversy?
Well, I guess it's people that see whether you're controversial or not. I don't. I merely speak my mind, and it's entirely up to people how they then define that, and others decide to define it as controversial. That's a term that people choose to use, but I basically think I go out and say exactly what I feel and what I think needs to be said.
What drew you to politics, if we can begin from there? And when do you recall when you became a political animal, so to speak?
I think I've been in politics ever since I can remember. But if you ask me, when did I begin to do political party? Politics, that's a different conversation.
Okay.
But politics for me started when I entered the women's movement just after college. And I was dealing with a very difficult issue, which was the issue of AIDS. At that time, as you may know, the entrance of AIDS brought in a lot of gender politics in it. And that's where my feminism came. But of course, entering the contestation around power and beginning to be associated with politics was when I started being associated with Margaret Dongo at the time that she stood as an independent candidate, and I became her election agent.
Okay, you were mentored by Comrade Margaret Dongo, and one remembers a teary-eyed young Priscilla shedding tears outside Town House in 1995 after Comrade Dongo lost to the late national heroine Vivian Mwashita for the Harare South constituency. The result was to be overturned on appeal, and Comrade Dongo won the rerun to enter parliament as an independent. What was going through your mind at that particular time? Firstly, the first results which said your candidate had lost the elections, and how did you become her election agent, and what were some of the lessons that you learned from there?
Well, I became Margaret Dongo's election agent in a very interesting way, actually. I had never been part of the political party issues, because then I was working in an NGO world, and I had never thought that the party political issues would be of interest. But I had watched Margaret Dongo from a distance, particularly when she then was kicked out of ZANU-PF and decided that she was going to stand as an independent candidate. And as a feminist, I was drawn to her. So I attended one of the first meetings that she had in Arcadia. And after she had finished addressing that rally, I then went to her and I said, can I help? What is it that I can do? And she said, well, just be here, hold my bag, work with me. So when she then started working on her elections, I then became her election agent. And it was very interesting because I was still working as an NGO director. And when I look back, I'm surprised how my employers actually allowed me to do that, because I was actually a director of an NGO. But I also then became her election agent. What I learned from Margaret was, I think, the zeal, the passion. Margaret is a very outspoken person. She is, I always say, she's larger than life. She has no space in which she is scared to go. She has no person she is scared to speak to. And I think watching her and seeing that it is possible to do so, worked on some of the things that probably were in me, but which I had not really gone out to look for. And she brought me to Parliament. She would let me sit in the gallery and I would watch it. deal with this man and engage with them. And it gave me this feeling that it's possible. And of course, she then encouraged me to run as a councillor, where the issues of my birth certificate became an issue. And she held my hand. So I literally worked with her and worked the system with her. So there is nothing that shocks me about how political parties operate, how males operate, how the political systems operate, how going to campaign for elections will operate, how being in parliament will operate. Unlike others who came in much fresh and had never sat back to watch, I had gone through that through somebody else.
Do you still believe, because some have written off independent candidates saying that they cannot win in 2018, they need the backing of the big political parties. From your experiences then, it was 1995 unheard of for someone to walk away from ZANU-PF and win as an independent. Comparison-wise, do you think it's possible for the new crop of candidates who are coming up and saying, I want to run as an independent?
I think the one thing that you learn as a politician is you can never say never. Because contexts, people behave differently depending on what is going on. It's possible. Everything is possible, but it's difficult. And I've said so to those that have come in as independent candidates. You see, Margaret was an independent candidate, but remember, she had been in the system whilst she was in a political party. So she had built structures within the political party. And when the breakup happened, I remember that particularly for the women in the party, in ZANU-PF, she moved with a whole lot of those women because she had worked with them over years. So you can't do that comparison of one who just walks in a constituency, is an independent, has never had structures before, to just rise up. But it's possible because, look here, I watch people like Vanafadzai, and I see that she has a different way of campaigning. They use a lot of social media. She there are different kinds that, this particular generation is beginning to use. And we watch and see. But what I've always cautioned is it's not going to be easy. It's not easy to walk into a system where you are contesting not only one political party, but a number of political parties who themselves have structures. So there has to be a dismantling to some extent of those structures to move on to you. And there has to be a belief that even though you don't have a political party, you have issues and interests that you can address as an independent person. So 2018 will be interesting. But like I've always said to those that are running, it's not a walk in the park.
Tonight on Late Night Politics, we are discussing women in politics, and in particular, I have in the studio Honorable Priscilla Misihairabwi-Mushonga, and we are just walking through a bit of history here to get a perspective on what it was like in the early 90s when she entered politics, party politics, and so forth. But I'm worried here because Comrade Dongo never went as far as most people thought she would go. Why is that so? I'm asking this from a perspective of, is there an unwritten down lifespan for women politicians? Because we're now going to look at issues that affect women politicians and how they dispense their duties. Is there an unwritten rule to say that women politicians cannot go past a certain age and so forth?
Certainly not. There is no unwritten rule. But there are certainly particular challenges that women politicians have to deal with. If you look at Margaret Dongo, for example, if we use her as a case study, one of the issues that worked against her was that when the broader movements were now being formed, the NCA, the MDC, she felt very strongly that she could not be part of those broader processes. She felt very strongly about the principles, she felt very strongly about the personalities that were involved in the broader movement, and therefore chose to stick to her space, so to speak. And me and her had a long conversation around it, because I felt differently at that time. And this is why you see that we then had a separate trajectory, for example. She continued to then continue with Zood. I then moved in at the formation of the MDC and went into the MDC. And I think that worked against her, for her to then fight a broader movement that had come in with loads of resources, and herself being a woman, worked against her. So at the time that she then decided to then go back and join Nana Simba and whatever, again, she struggled with those areas. And I think it's typical of women who are very powerful and very principled about their issues. There's a lot of compromise that comes into, if you have been in your own space and very convinced about where you are, to begin to say, you know what, this is Priscilla, but unfortunately, there are times when I have to submit and I have to compromise to certain processes. So I think Margaret is a typical case of a woman who very principled, stood for what she stood for, but of course the tide worked against her. And I think it continues. I don't know when she's going to come back and whether things are going to be different. But if you look generally at women, there's something that happens in politics. And it's systemic. It's targeted. For me, I think there is what people say, there is a method in the madness. It can't be that you have these men that started politics in 60s who still are there today, and you can't find a woman who started politics at that time who still is there. There must be something that goes wrong. And the simple thing is that patriarchy works against powerful women. It gangs up against powerful women. It deals with powerful women and it throws them out of the system. And when they are thrown out of the system, it's very difficult for them to find themselves back. Because men by nature like good women, quiet women. You started by saying you're controversial. I don't think I'm controversial. I think the problem is I can't keep quiet when things are not, in my opinion, not right. And men generally have not been socialized to accept that, because you are challenging the very nature of how they grew up. So they will gang up, they will agree, and they will throw you out.
Let's look at some of the language that you face as a woman politician. The language, I don't know. Is it the same language that I would describe a male politician, or what language do you face?
Certainly not. The usual language that men use to be able to deal with women and to be able to deal with your self-esteem is that you are a prostitute, that you do not have good morals, that you know the latest one that I get to hear now, because what men then do is they try and use comparisons. Oh, I wish she could speak like so-and-so, because so-and-so is quiet. She's not a loud mouth. So you now have things like, oh, she's a drama queen. She lacks attention. But there are all these words that are used to put you down, to make you change the way that you do business, because they are uncomfortable. Chamisa speaks all the time in Parliament. I've never heard anybody saying he's a drama king. Why don't we have the word drama king? There are so many people that I could speak about who are males, who speak a lot, who get a lot of media attention. But people don't come back and say, oh, they get media attention because they are drama kings. But if I do speak and I do something, the way of putting me down is to say, oh, Priscilla, she's a drama queen. Oh, she's trying to do this. After all, and worse, you lose a husband. Oh, after all, now she doesn't have a husband. Oh, then others would actually want to sit down. Oh, but you don't know, she has loads of stories. She bedded so-and-so. She did this with so-and-so. And that in itself is terminology that is used against women. And even if a man is like that and he's got sex scandals one after the other, he is never painted in the same manner that women are painted, even without any evidence of any form of sex scandal. But it's easy for men to do so. You have reason, because you must have been sleeping with so-and-so. Seriously, she could never have gotten to that position if it wasn't because she was sleeping with this particular man. Why don't we say exactly the same about men? That they've risen because they've been associated with some woman who has pushed them up at one level or the other. So
this stereotyping, what has it done to our politics in terms of nipping the potential of a possibly good leader from getting to the top and leading?
Well, like you rightly said, your first question was, where are the women? Why don't we see the longevity that is associated with males? Because whether you like it or not, politics is a learning game. If you had spoken to me, like you're rightly saying, when I was crying when Margaret Dongo lost that election, and to now, I'm a different person, because it's about the experience, it's about the trials, it's about the challenges. It grows you, it strengthens you. So you become a much more mature politician as you stay in the system. But if you don't stay, it means that potential that is in you never grows. So what happens is that potential in women gets killed at a very early age. So you continuously have younger people coming in, newer people coming in. And because the moment they grow and they become a challenge to the system, they're injected, they come out. So you never really begin to see. I mean, look at the person, Hillary Clinton, for example. I mean, you could see that, when she contested this election, it was a different Hillary to the Hillary who contested during the Obama era. Of course, she lost that election, but you had a sense that something had happened between the last election when she tried to run as president to this election, where she then contested this Trump. So naturally, politics, like any job, whether it's a DJ, the first day that you sat there and started interviewing somebody, and today is a completely different thing, because it's a learning curve. And that's the unfortunate thing. The reason why we never really get women then running as presidential candidates and holding serious positions is that they're killed at a very early age because of all these things that we're talking about.
Yes, tonight on Late Night Politics, it's a serious discussion. We're discussing women in politics, and I'm honored to have in the studio Honorable Priscilla Misihairabwi-Mushonga. And we have talked about the stereotyping, we've talked about women politicians contesting, but there's another dimension which has come up. They say, okay, every politician, in order to enter the race, you must have internal shock absorbers. But there's also where I can say, okay, you can go and face the crowd and campaign there, and you can get your brick bets. Some can say what they want, and some you can connect. But there's also the issue of social media, where it can also come. You're at home and you're going through, and someone throws epithets and everything. How do you manage to keep your absorbers strong? Can you really get over it?
No, you can't. You really can't. And you see, the bullying that is in the social media is more painful because it's faceless individuals. They're spooks. And because somebody is hiding behind the social media because they can't be seen, it's even more vicious. I mean, the way people attack women, in the social media is very different from the way that you would decide to attack me if I'm face to face to you. And I've actually joked and said, many times now that I look at the social media, I'm actually convinced that men are more cowardly than women, because a man is unable to stand with me toe to toe and say the things that he's able to do, but can do all those things behind the social media. And the social media is also painful in that, there are other people that see it. I've got a son who is 23, and one of the problems that I have to deal with continuously is those times when he then says, "Oh, Mom, are you okay?" Because I know that he probably would have read a whole lot. And like a typical son, he is feeling protective, but he really does not know how to deal with it. So your family goes through that. All the other people that have had issues with you, family-wise or otherwise, will then use the social media to come back to you. But like everything else, you have to... I've always said, I say there are more people that appreciate me than there are those that don't appreciate me. It's just that those that appreciate me do not try it as much as they do. So I pick up the statements of those that I meet when I'm in a shop and buying something, and somebody comes and hugs me and said, oh, you know, I love you. Please, can I have a selfie with you? So when I hear these horrible things, my mind turns back to the positive, because there are more positive people than there are negative. It's just that we are trained in our minds to concentrate more on the nasty people than on those that stand up to defend us.
Okay, we are going to come back to women in politics per se as we discuss the women's election convergence. But for now, let's just go back into a bit of history. You were one of the lead negotiators leading to the government of national unity. And I remember former finance minister Tendai Biti came to this program, and he told us that at one time there was throwing of water between him and then ZANU-PF negotiator Comrade Patrick Chinamasa. Your recollections of the negotiations and how were you perceived as a woman? I know that it became maybe easier because also President Zuma also appointed the key person for Zimbabwean issues was also a woman.
Yeah, both from the time, the Mbeki time, there were women on the other side. We had Mojangu, Advocate Mojangu during the Mbeki area, and of course we had Lindiwe. In the next period, the Zuma time. But back to your question, for me, because I was the only woman negotiator, so on the table it was only me. Both from a purely political negotiation to also the constitutional negotiation, where we had a management team of 9 men. And I think the unfortunate thing is we don't use women for those processes, because there are many times that I became the person who opened dialogue. Because if I went to see Chinamasa on my own, his response was not as bad as the response he would automatically have if he is talking to Tendai or he's talking to Welshman. Because, you know, naturally, the men, this is why I said, unless they're hiding behind something, men have an issue being as abrasive as they usually pretend to be when they're sitting across the table, because who they see in most cases is their sister, is their mother. I'm sure you have had Tendai when he comes or he's on, and you say to them, what about Priscilla? And you say, she's my mother, because my son is Tendai. And, you know, he has become, so I'm able to say a lot of things that other males are unable to say to Tendai, for example. So during the negotiation process, even the night before we went to see the principals, because we had serious issues and we had walked out of each other and had said, forget the principals meeting, it's not going to happen. We had issues around the devolution, and Honorable Chinamasa had said no. I remember Honorable Chinamasa phoning me around 5 in the morning and saying, please come to the office, can we have this conversation? He didn't phone his male colleagues, he phoned me. And it took me having a conversation with him and then going back to the guys and saying, oh, Chinamasa has phoned me and said this. So you find that males have a different way of dealing with women. But we also, and you may find this funny, I keep saying the difference between us and men around issues of negotiation are very simple. Tinorambwa. Munotiramba, and we are used to. If you ask any woman, she walks away from a relationship. Why? Because we can see the signs. We don't wait for you to humiliate us. So we can pick things when they are going wrong. Whereas you as guys can sit there and be totally humiliated until the end. So somebody sits there and says, what the heck is this guy doing? Because you have problems with rejection. And yet we grew up with rejection. You know, this first boyfriend of mine, he's no longer doing what he used to do before, he has moved on. I don't wait for you because I know a black man never comes back. It's all signs. You don't call anymore, you don't do the things that, and I walk away. Whereas for you men, rejection is so bad, which is why because you're thinking, my God, if I go and Priscilla says no, it hits you so bad. Whereas with us, it's a natural instinct. So yeah, the thing was to use my femininity during negotiations. So I didn't try to be a male. I continued to be female and used that femininity to push a lot of things, which is why if you look in the Constitution, if you look in the GPA, there's probably no negotiation document that has as many issues and has lots of reference to women's rights and to women's issues, because it was easy for these guys to give that to me. Also because they felt they needed to. I was the only other woman who was sitting there.
The burden of caring, because sometimes, of course, you have gone there and you are the only woman there. You are carrying the expectations of other Zimbabweans, but more so other women. Wasn't it a burden?
It was, but I took advantage of it in creating structures that supported me. I had formal structures that supported me. So in terms of drafting, for example, the things that I needed for it to go into a GPA document, I had a group of young, bright lawyers who would draft those things for me. So I didn't have to sit down, and I would come in and make a representation over certain things and they would be taken in. But like I say, I had good relationships with the women that were the mediators. So we would have those conversations. I know at some time we got some stuff from Graca Machel, which came onto the table as part of the suggestions that she had, and she had spoken to Mojangu around that. And I've kept those relationships. So yes, it was difficult, but it was also, if you create a support structure that is not sitting at the table. During the negotiations, a lot of the women in the women's movement had an opportunity to meet up with Mbeki, for example, during the Mbeki time, with the principals, and had discussions. And when things were getting difficult and we're like not getting an agreement, women went and camped in at Harare International Conference Center and demanded to see Mbeki and demanded to see the principals. And some of them came to address the women that were there. So I think the problem is if you sit and you leave everybody else behind, then that becomes a problem. But if you sit and you merely become the person who speaks at the table, but have a support system that is back there, because then they are able to say to you, watch out for this, please bring this in. And that way I didn't feel like I was the only person at the table, because I had a lot of support of other women.
The program is Late Night Politics, and tonight I have the honor of having Priscilla Misihairabwi-Mushonga in the studio, and we are discussing women in politics. Quite an interesting discussion. The GNU era. You are now a minister, and you are in there, and the economy seems to be up on the mend. And 2013 comes along, and they say that you lose the elections, and they said your critics came back harshly on you, and they said you went to sleep during the GNU era. You forgot why you were there. No reforms, no meaningful reforms were done. Yes.
Well, you start with a very interesting point, and this is where I find the assessment of what we did in the inclusive government interesting, because at one level people admit that things changed. So on the ground, things changed. Economy got better. Industry got better. Schools opened. You had books in schools. Let me speak for myself. We opened the one-stop border post in Chirundu. There were a lot of activities that happened. So you can't say we forgot while we were there. In fact, we people, take us on for being too good. We went in and we focused on the job that we had, because we believed that both of us were on the table for the same thing. We wanted to make people's lives different. We did not realize that for others, it was about retention of power. For us, it was about delivery. It was about making things different for people. And so that's where we spend our time doing. And you remember, we didn't even believe the election was going to come as early as it did, because we're still negotiating. And we're saying, let's not go into another election that is going to be contested. And we believe that because things were going so well, it was possible to negotiate for us to have an election that is not going to be contested. So if there is anything that we need to be taken on, It's our naivety in wanting to do what the people expected us to do. Remember, we knew people, we had never been in government, and yet when we went in, we had to learn the ropes very quickly and deliver. And deliver we did. And I've never heard anybody who looks at why we had such a growth rate in the economy, and immediately after 2013, we went down. So there must be something that we did well. But like you're saying, it was a difference in what was important. For us, what was important was not that I would come back and be a minister. What was important was, have I made the life of a Zimbabwean different? And lives became different. And lives changed. And unfortunately, you only see the importance of people when they've left. Which is why when you walk into the street today, people say, but are you telling us you are never going to go back? Because people then appreciated that you needed somebody who could create an oversight. You needed somebody who could hold ZANU-PF accountable. But at that stage, you didn't feel it because people thought, oh, you're in a gravy train. Oh, you are now driving cars. Oh, you're having such a happy life. And I look back and I say to myself, nothing changed in my life from the time I went into government and the time I walked out. But I hear it when people say reforms didn't take place. But it was because what we prioritized and what our colleagues prioritized were two different things. We prioritized people, they prioritized power. And that's where the difference was.
And most political parties could not handle the defeat. MDC-T, you remember, Tendai Bit went his way, and it was quite a messy divorce. And how did the MDC handle it? Were the people prepared for a loss, considering that you considered what you had done in the government of national unity was an endorsement to say the electorate, look, put us back in?
No, it was a shock. It was a shock. I mean, I talk for my own political party. I can't remember a time in which myself and Prof. Khupe worked as hard as we did. We slept in villages, literally slept in villages, sat in villages, went and sat down with traditional leaders. We tried to give an alternative to leadership. And because we had made remarkable changes, we felt that we would be judged on the basis of the changes that we had. At a personal level, and I've said it, I personally had a mental breakdown. I had clinical depression, and I had to go off and be treated for close to 5-6 months. I was on treatment for like 6 months around clinical depression. That's how bad it was at a personal level. And there are things that I had to change. And if you may remember, that is the time that I decided I was not going to continue as the Secretary General of the party. So all of us, both as parties but as individual personalities, had a real knock over what happened in 2013 because we felt betrayed by people. We felt that people had not judged us fairly. And people respond in many ways, and like you're saying, others do splits, others do. There's when a catastrophe like that happens, there is a lot of blaming each other. You could have done it differently, you probably didn't, and this is why I take it when I hear Zimbabweans saying, "Oh, we went to sleep." I actually blame Zimbabweans and I say, some of you didn't come out to vote. You became too comfortable. You didn't register to vote. You didn't go and vote. You didn't take us seriously. So this is your answer. But, you are right. It was bad. It was a bad catastrophe.
Okay, how are relations with Professor Welshman Khupe at the moment in the party, between you and him?
Well, they're okay. They're okay. We talk civilly, but because I'm no longer in the leadership of the party, so the number of times that we talk or engage obviously is different. The engagements I used to do with him are different, but we are okay. We talk to each other when there is need to talk to each other. We do talk to each other.
So there's no fallout. There's no.
No, certainly not. You remember that when I. When I resigned as the Secretary General, there were a lot of fractions that came out of the party. There were lots of calls, recall her. And I also personally wanted to resign. And I had long conversations with him about not being able to take this. And the person who stood in the party, and I know that for a fact, and basically said, no, there was not going to be any recall of Priscilla. And at the same time, him talking to me and saying, but you can't. If you are convinced that on principle you will be able to do a good job, I think it's important for you to stay where you are staying. So he was a support system during that time. And I'm glad he was a support system, because I think I would not have been able to do the things that I did during this particular point in time if I had not stayed, and if I did not believe that I had the party leadership supporting me. So certainly, yes, they obviously will always be difference of opinions, and that's what my relationship with him has always been. He knew he was dealing with a difficult personality. I don't think he's an easy personality himself. He's very strong opinionated, but that's what made up our relationship. And I've known him for close to 20 years. He was a friend to my brother, so he's almost like a brother to me. So we almost had a sibling kind of relationship where he thought I was his kid sister, and I refused to be treated like a kid sister. But yeah, it's okay. There certainly is no fallout.
Enter the MDC alliance. And you are quoted as saying, look at the top table, it's all male, and where are the women? Are you still sticking by that position?
I do. I still stick by that position. I'm glad, and I did speak to Tendai in particular, and I raised it with him, and the good thing is he acknowledged that there is an issue, and I hear that when they went to Bulawayo, they did try and fix the talking, but it doesn't change the complexion of the fact that the leadership still rests in males. And I know that some of the responses I've had through the media has been, but the leaders of political parties are males. What do you want to do? I think it's just a lame excuse. There are loads of things that you can do. Particularly if you want to create an impression that says women are part of this process. You can't keep giving the excuse that we have no choice because we have a male leadership. It's a new thing that you are bringing up. You can always think outside the box to be able to address it. Otherwise,
do you have suggestions of how they could have done it?
Well, unfortunately, the problem, and I've said it with other people that have asked me the same question, I have no idea what this thing is. I have not seen the document. I have not had anybody speak to me about it. And I always say to people, I was born of a Ndebele mother who would always say to me, so if somebody doesn't think I should not know, I don't barge in to demand that I should know. I'm not in the leadership of the party, and there may be a decision that was taken that says, it is a particular people that will know. So it's difficult for me to actually speak to you and say, what is this all about? If I had seen the document and I'd seen how it was structured, I would then be able to say to you, I think this is how it can be differently structured. But as it is, other than reading in the newspapers like everybody else, I know absolutely nothing about what the MDC Alliance stands for. But at the time, if we do get the document and some of the people let us in, I have no problem raising my issues up, what my issues are. But like I said to you, there is no excuse. I don't care what that structure is like. I don't care what your challenges are. You need to say to yourselves, in the 20th century, given the 2013 election, that the 2013 constitution that we have, section 17, and given the fact that you are saying you are an alternative, progressive, democratic movement, you cannot create an impression where you have a group of 7 men saying we lead an alliance. I don't care what you need to do. Something needs to change. Otherwise, it's totally unacceptable.
Okay, we were going to talk about the women's selection convergence, but firstly, some have said, okay, if you criticize it that way, why don't women form their own political party and lead it?
Well, it's a very, I don't know how to put it. It's a very defeatist attitude. Because if we start saying so, we might as well create a Mars where we ship a particular agenda to go to. The question is, if we still want to live together as men and women, then we have to wake up a system in which both of us are sitting at the table and are making a difference. It's a cowardly way of saying it. It's a very misogyny argument. It basically says we hate women, so please go and find a space for yourself. And I don't think it's an argument that makes sense. And therefore, I don't even entertain that argument. The point is we have a problem and we need to address it. We have had this problem not now, but before. When we were having the liberation struggle, those women that wanted to raise these issues were told, wait until we deal with the Smith regime, then we'll deal with the women's issues. Let's deal with the bigger picture. And they kept quiet. Came independence, let's deal with the development, then we'll deal with the bigger picture. Now we have those that are calling themselves Democrats and progressive. No, let's deal with the ZANU, then we'll deal with the women's issues. Oh no, we are going to deal with the women's issues even as we deal with the issues around democratization, because bringing women on the table is democratization. So no one is going to shut me out from saying it is wrong until you address it. We'll push, we'll mobilize, we'll critique until such a time that you look up. Like I said, I'm happy that we complained about the lack of women's voices the last time when they did the launch of the alliance. It got to them. I listened to Tendai as he said here, and typically clever him, he went around it, she's my mom or whatever, and didn't really deal with but he acknowledged. And I'm glad that he must have gone to the table and said, you know what, we can't continue to do the Harare. So they have to sit down again and continue to say, we can't continue to be saying we are leaders of alliance when we are sitting there and we are all the 7 males. It's totally unacceptable. And some of us will continue to say we will not embrace the alliance as long as it is not having a woman in the leadership in one form or the other. They should deal with it. They created the structure. They need to fix it.
One other issue that also has arisen is the violence which seeks to silence a certain contribution from a woman politician in the MDC-T. She wants to make a contribution. She's not happy with the alliance, but it seems there is a bit of some supporters are saying, look, let's deal with it, let's punish her. I'm talking about MDC-T Vice President Thokozani Khupe's case. Well, the media today says they will be talking, and we don't know.
Yeah, I've made my point very clear. Firstly, violence is unacceptable for whatever reason, towards whatever agenda, and we made it clear. We issued a statement, of course, under the Women's Election Convergence, and asked the leadership, and particularly Morgan Tsvangirai, to take responsibility and to apologize. And I've said it over and over again. I've said it to some of the people in the MDC, and I've said that apology did not speak to me as a woman. I'm not speaking for Thokozani Khupe. I'm speaking for myself. The statement they should have issued should not have had anything to do with the MDC Alliance. It should have been for Tsvangirai to take responsibility about his colleague. I am sorry, Thokozani Khupe, this happened. I take full responsibility, not that I sent the people, but because I'm president of this political party. What happened to you should not have happened. And just use the word I'm sorry. It would have made a huge difference. I did not hear the word I'm sorry. I heard him speaking to the nation. I did not hear him speaking to Thokozani Khupe. And I've said it to those that are in the MDC-T that I speak to. And I've said that statement did not, and there was no reason to then say, this is the work of the CIO. Forget it. I don't care whether the CIO was there or not. The point is, you are a president of a political party. Your vice president, your colleague that has stood with you for so many years, has suffered this kind of abuse. It's totally unacceptable. Secondly, they should have banned anybody going on the social media wanting to justify. I don't care what the reason was I'm not in the MDC-T. I don't know whether Thokozani Khupe is right or whether the other people are right. But the point is, in this country where we have continuously been talking about making sure that we are free of violence, we ourselves can't be seen to be perpetuating it. I don't want to go into the house as we open right now and challenge ZANU-PF on issues of violence, and they come back to me and they say, you know what, shut up. You people have no moral high ground to stand up. And unfortunately, that's what that incident did. It created problems for us who have been standing up and saying the system, the reforms that you've been talking about. How do we justify reforms when we ourselves are being seen as perpetrators? And therefore, that for me is problematic. And I'm hoping that as they begin to address it, and as they are speaking to some of us who really think that dialogue is the way to move, they are picking those things. But you see, it's not just about MDC-T. It's about the nature of political parties. The reason why you are going to have problems finding women that come and have an interview with you here is women in political parties are walking on eggshells. They are scared of saying, if I say this, will it be accepted? Or will I be seen to be a rebel? Or will I be seen to be working against my own political party? If you are in the opposition, the moment you say something, you are supposed to be CIO, you are supposed to be working with ZANU. If you are in ZANU-PF, if you say something, you are supposed to be working with the opposition. So it makes women find it very difficult to be able to speak their minds because they are constantly afraid of violence, afraid of being fired in the party. And this is why, for me, the one thing that I will always be happy about the party that I'm in and the party that I represented, it gave me the freedom to be myself. I don't remember at one time having spoken or said anything in Parliament and receiving a phone call from my party that says, but you should not have said it. Whether it was the issue around tribalism, marginalization, women, I've been able to speak my mind and to stand up for what I believe in. I don't know what will happen tomorrow, but at least that I'm grateful for, because I've had the space to be Priscilla and to speak my mind without constantly having to look behind my back and think, if I were to say so, will somebody write a letter and say I'm recalled? Will somebody send people to come and beat me up? Will somebody say that? And I'm hoping that we can have more women that can stand up and say, if you want to fire me, please go ahead. But this is totally unacceptable. And I've said it to women in the MDC-T. You can't speak to me in the corridor and say it is wrong. I want you to stand up and say what happened is wrong and was wrong, and this is how we are going to address it, because otherwise we are all going to be victims of the system.
For those who have just joined us, the program is Late Night Politics, and tonight we have Honorable Priscilla Misihairabwi-Mushonga, and we're discussing women in politics. And this is a first. We haven't had women coming through. Of course, we had Fadzaima here, but from the mainstream parties, we haven't had anyone coming through. And we encourage women politicians to step forward. I know that Priscilla has said that they're walking on eggshells. It's scary out there for the women in politics, but we don't see it probably from our privileged position as men. So let's discuss the women election convergence. We're going to spend the rest of the time discussing that. Who is involved and what is it?
Well, the women's election convergence 18, and thank you. Let me first thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to speak on this particular project, because we feel very strongly that this can change the dynamics of politics in this country. It was founded by a group of 4 of us who accidentally had been invited to the same meeting. It was Joyce Mujuru, myself, Thokozani Khupe, and Lucia Matibenga. It was after the meeting that we then found ourselves sitting around the table. And we're saying, but do we have to have other people from outside calling us and inviting us for a meeting for us to begin to talk as women across political parties? Because in sharing experiences, we then found that we're facing the same challenges. It didn't matter in which political party you were, but we were facing the same challenges, and that we would be stronger together. as women politicians. But we also had to look at the challenge that you raised initially. We are getting older. We are coming out of politics. We will have to come out of politics. What legacy are we leaving behind? And that's when we then thought about having the Women's Election Convergence. And we called it Women's Election Convergence 18 because we said, let's make it a very short-term program now up to the elections 2018, so that we can then review and say if somebody wants to take it forward, if we want to continue to do it. But for now, it's around the 2018 election. And it has very basic objectives. The first one is to mobilize 2 million women to go onto the voters' roll, because we said we have an opportunity where people have to register afresh. So let's get women to go onto the register. Let's get women, as they become people who are on the voters registration, to begin to demand in the spaces in which they are that they need to be found at a table, whether that table is at local government or whether that table is at local government. So that's what the Women's Election Convergence will be doing: mobilization, monitoring the electoral process, but also beginning to advocate so that women can sit on the table. So we have had 2 launches so far. We had a launch in Harare, where we did close to about 2,000 women that came. Bulawayo was even much better. We had close to 4,000 women that came. We are going to be having more activities. We are going to be launching a call-in center where women can phone in if they're having problems with registration and challenges, and we can then respond and begin to engage. If it's ZAC, we engage with ZAC. If it's them being intimidated or there's violence, we get in touch with the ZRP, because we'll have a center to which that calling center is going to be coming in. So in the next 3 weeks or so, given the fact that the voter registration is coming in, we are going to be setting up that calling center that will be dealing with it. But the first thing is that we want to put women on the map. But here is the challenge: the moment we went on the map, men meet at NERA, they meet at the Alliance, nobody has said there is a conspiracy. But the very first time that we, as the 4 women, were seen standing together, conspiracy theories were abound. Oh, they are wanting to form a political party. And I keep saying to people, no one stops us from having a political party. If we actually want to have a political party, we don't have to have a conspiracy about it. We will sit down and we'll say, Maim Juru, you are the Secretary General. Priscilla, you are the President. We are not stopped by anybody. And we are strong enough women to be able to do that. But I think there is always a challenge with women getting together. I was joking with Chamisa in Parliament one of these days, and he said something that I keep repeating now. He says, oh, my sister, do you know, we as men, if we see women standing up, Cheropare Pamariro, we just think about plan of batch tuna. That's how bad we are. We just can't deal with the issue that you guys can be standing on your own and engaging and having a conversation. So there are now challenges around running it from a political party perspective, because as you rightly said around Khupe, now there are some who say if they see Khupe, me and my jury standing up, say, oh, you see, because she's fighting with Morgan Tsvangirai, now she's trying to create an alliance with Maim Juru. Some in my party will say, oh, we can't associate with the Women's Election Convergence because, perhaps Priscilla is actually fighting with Walshman over the position that Walshman has done. So those things become a problem. But we are going to be doing many more activities in the coming, because we've told ourselves we are not going to be hamstrung by people that have issues. We have an objective, we will stick to our objective. And like I said, if we actually want to form a political party, we don't have to apply to anybody and ask for permission from anybody. We will form a political party. We don't think we need to be forming a political party right now. We don't think it is the time to do so. I think there is enough that is going on. We need to be engaging and beginning to say what works at this particular point in time for those that are in the progressive movement.
Yeah. The main challenge which I also see is the outreach to the rural areas for the Women's Election Convergence. How do you intend to reach all the women?
You see, there are two things that are a problem for women in this country. Only two. The first one is the issue of fear, and the second one is the issue of information. If you go into the rural communities, is the issue that women are afraid to engage with the political system. And sometimes the information that is going there, particularly because we are starting a new system that has a lot of technology. You know, a lot of lies are coming in. Hey, you'll be pictured. Hey, you'll be like this. But we have also realized that there is a different way of engaging with a woman. With a woman, it's not about a rally for you to speak. With a woman, it's about finding a friend with which she can confide in and she can have faith in. So the Women's Election Convergence is picking up on a number of women that participate in the Women's Election Convergence. And those are the women who speak not to women who is a stranger in the street, but to your sister, to your child, to your daughter, to your aunt, because she is the person who is then able to say to you, but I'm afraid, but will I not be seen? But what will it mean about making my own choice? So we want to use a different structure of engaging. So you will not find us in communities where we think that for women to come in, it may actually expose them to danger. But those women will be talking. And the good thing is that this social media is good because women are on WhatsApp. The only difference is they're on WhatsApp for different things. And I've said to them, for things that don't matter, they are busy talking about girlfriend, which is not helpful. So if we can use the WhatsApp conversations to be conversations about elections, about going to put out your voice, about the secrecy of your vote, about why it's important to begin to bring women onto the table, that is what we are going to be using. So you will not see a lot of, if you see us meeting, we are meeting people who have connections to another person. So, for example, for every woman that we are meeting in Zimbabwe, we are saying, can you go and speak to 100 women? Because Pamairo they definitely will be 100 women that will be coming. So those women that you know will come and sing for the 2 days, those are the women that we want you to talk to.
Okay, Zimbabwe is a signatory to the SADC protocol with a provision that gives a 50-50 gender balance. Zimbabwe has not yet reached this 50-50 gender balance or the SADC protocol. What is the effectiveness? Do we also have here locally, if we want to localize it, do we have a legal framework in Zimbabwe which promotes women's participation in politics?
The Constitution. So we actually don't even have to go to SADC. We have a fantastic 2013 constitution. Section 17 of our constitution speaks about gender equality in all spheres. And it actually calls upon government not to think, not to plan, not to aspire, but that it must ensure that there is a 50-50. So our own constitution is the best legal framework that we have. What we need to be arguing for now is to say, how do we create the legal act that will make sure that that becomes an issue? For example, one of the issues that we are going to be pushing for now, for us that are in this the last session of Parliament, is to make sure that we begin to talk about an act that says, for the 210 seats, 105 have to be women and 105 have to be men. Whether that is by forcing political parties to say, we will not accept a nomination form from a political party that does not have a gender balance. Therefore, because we have done it with the Senate, we have insisted that at the Senate, when you bring in your 6 names, you will have a zebra. And we have even gone further in the Senate and said the first person on your list of a political party has to be a woman, which is why you will see that in the Senate, our numbers are much more different than those that are in the lower house. We have been okay reasonably because of the 60 seats that we have had. But you know that our constitution had a sunset clause that says in 2023 the 60 seats have to go. Some of us are still arguing that we may have to continue with the 60 seats. But in addition to those 60 seats, we have to begin to create a legal framework that forces political parties to say your nominations will not be accepted unless they have a gender balance. And that should be easy. What you then do as a political party, whether you define certain seats as women's seats, whether that is your business at your political party. But from a national point of view, a national legal framework will say your nominations will not be accepted unless they are showing a gender balance. And that's one of the major wars that some of us are going to be taking as we go into this last session of Parliament. Okay,
some will argue that if we are going to be equal, men, women, therefore enter the race on an equal platform, why do you need to reserve seats for women?
Why are we still talking about indigenization? White people and black people are the same. They have the same organs, they walk the same way, they breathe the same air. The very fact is that we are admitting that there is a particular gender that because of social political issues have been marginalized. And we need to address that. And it's scientific, it's factual. It's not something that people are just thinking about. So if you still think indigenization in this day and age is relevant in the context of Zimbabwe, don't tell me a story about why it's not relevant to have issues that facilitate the entrance of women. There will come a time in which those social issues and political issues will have changed. The structural issues will have changed. But right now, remember, we spent the whole evening today talking about the challenges that are associated with you just being a woman. It will take another generation. It will probably take our great-grandchildren to, they'll look back and they'll say, but seriously, people used to think that about women. Just like you walk into Sweden and somebody will say to you, is it quite serious? Because it's a natural thinking. When somebody sets up a cabinet, they don't have to be told you need 50% women, you need 50%. It's natural. It's not in any law. It's expected. But here, we still have to deal with a whole cabinet that has 4 women. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that brings me to my next question. Are you happy with the representation of women in government, in parastatals and so forth, leading organizations?
Certainly not. And that's one of the main things that I have a major difference with women that are in ZANU-PF, because many of them will come back and say, but the laws are there. And I say, you can have the law, but if your implementation is bad, there is nothing that stops President Mugabe right now from appointing 50% of the women. Why are we having 4 women in cabinet in today's age? You get a lot of excuses. Where are the women? There are loads of them, intelligent, bright women. If he has a problem, he needs to call any of us, and I'll give him as many women as he wants. Those that are in ZANU-PF, not only in the opposition. So it's just an excuse. It's a patriarchal thinking. It's wrong, and it needs to be challenged. The same with parastatals. We have a law right now that says in every parastatal you need to have a gender equality. But most of the parastatals have not even followed that particular provision that we now have. So it's just a problem of political will and political commitment, because these are not elected positions. Somebody is standing up and nominating people and appointing people, and they are just making a decision that I am not going to appoint women. And there's something wrong with that attitude.
That brings me to another term which has become prevalent these days, especially going towards 2018, the women's vote. What does it mean when we say the women's vote?
It means women coming out to vote. That's why I was talking to you about 2 million women. And what we are saying to women is you can't complain about representation when you have not participated. You need to begin to use your numbers to demand for certain things to happen. So where you are right, where you're saying to me, but men were saying go and form your own political party. I've said if we have 2 million women, no one can come back to me and say, but why are you asking the alliance to have a woman? Because I'll tell them, if you're not going to have a woman, then you're not going to have the 2 million votes. Because these 2 million votes are an alternative progressive vote. And we are going to be going out and saying, unless there is a change in the structure and in the presentation of political parties, you are not going to have these women coming for you. So we have a negotiation that we have in our hands. The reason why men take us for granted is that you have never been able to mobilize yourselves and stand up and have something that you are negotiating with. You just can't come to the table without a negotiating power. And so the women's vote is a negotiating power. It is a coming together of a particular group of people who are saying, we are going to either withhold our vote or we are going to give you our vote on the basis of what it is that you are promising to do for us. And the first one is representation. The second one is, what are those things that matter for us as women? So if you're not going to say there is going to be user fees or implement the policy of user fees for all pregnant women, then you are not good enough to be a government. You can only be a government if you are able to say, I can be pregnant and I'll be able to give birth without necessarily having my baby and myself detained because I've not paid a certain amount of money. So the women's vote is a negotiating tool for us to get what we want on the table in 2018.
Thank you very much, Honorable Priscilla Misihairabwi-Mushonga, for coming through to Late Night Politics. Will you be running in 2018?
I have no idea.
Not yet.
I have absolutely no idea, because you see, typically the issues around running are always about whether you are in a political party or whether you're outside a political party. And at the moment, I have absolutely no idea. I have no idea whether my political party still thinks I need to represent them. I have no idea whether if they decide that it's not going to happen, I still want to run. I have not. So it's quite fluid at the moment. I'll probably know later on as we go towards an election. But like some of us have been saying, I think for all those that are serious about where this country goes, it's not about whether you run. It's about whether tane muka yacho pa table. So like Tendai would always say, you always eat what you kill. Okay. So if we have not killed, and at the moment we have not one person on the voters roll, I think it's ridiculous for anybody to start thinking about, I will run in this, I will have that constituency, because you have to prove to me that you have mobilized people that are going to vote for you before you can even dream of running on an election. There is more work that needs to be done, and we have not started doing that work.
Is there a book coming out of you, your vast experience?
You know, I'm very upset with my close friends, and I keep saying so. I say I can't be the one who is doing all these things and also writing. So I've put a challenge to all those that are close to me, that somebody needs to close me into some cottage, some room for 5 days and just tape. And that's the challenge I'm also giving to you. If you want a book, close me up somewhere, give me tapes, ask me the questions that you're asking, then sit down and use your journalistic experience and write a book.
Yes,
and I'll sign it
from
off.
the 19s
I will sign it off. I'll give you the right to be the one who writes the autograph.
No, thank you very much for coming through to Late Night Politics. We're discussing women in politics, and I had Priscilla Misihairabwi-Mushonga gracing us tonight. We were discussing a lot of issues, some of her political history, her experiences through the GNU, and up to the women's election convergence. And it's only up to me to say thank you very much, and to our listeners, thank you for listening. Thank you for coming through, Honorable Mushonga.
Thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Good night.
All right, nice.
You've been listening to Late Night Politics on StarFm, taking an in-depth look at the Zimbabwean political scene. Join us again next week, Monday, same time on StarFM.